Hare Krishna. This is a narration of the book The Perfection of Yoga by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupāda, where he explains the yoga of divine love. He cuts through the commercialization that now clouds the real meaning of yoga. And he explains that beyond the postures and exercises, the ancient teachings of yoga aim at lasting, loving union with the Supreme. Chapter 1. Yoga as rejected by Arjuna. There have been many yoga systems popularized in the Western world, especially in this century, but none of them have actually taught the perfection of yoga. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, teaches Arjuna directly the perfection of yoga. If we actually want to participate in the perfection of yoga system, in Bhagavad Gita we will find the authoritative statements of the Supreme Person. It is certainly remarkable that the perfection of yoga was taught in the middle of a battlefield. It was taught to Arjuna, the warrior, just before Arjuna was to engage in a fratricidal battle. Out of sentiment, Arjuna was thinking, "Why should I fight against my own kinsmen?" That reluctance to fight was due to Arjuna's illusion, and just to eradicate that illusion, Sri Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to him. One can just imagine how little time must have elapsed while Bhagavad Gita was being spoken. All the warriors on both sides were poised to fight, so there was very little time indeed. At the most, 1 hour. Within this 1 hour, the whole Bhagavad Gita was discussed, and Sri Krishna set forth the perfection of all yoga systems to his friend Arjuna. At the end of this great discourse, Arjuna set aside his misgivings and fought. However, within the discourse, when Arjuna heard the explanation of the meditational system of yoga, how to sit down, how to keep the body straight, how to keep the eyes half closed, and how to gaze at the tip of the nose without diverting one's attention, all this being conducted in a secluded place, alone, he replied, "Yoyam yogas tvaya proktaha, samyena madhusudana, etasyaham na pashyami, chanchalatvat sthitim stiram," which translates into, "O Madhusudana, this system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable for me, for the mind is restless and unsteady." This is important. We must always remember that we are in a material circumstance wherein at every moment our mind is subject to agitation. Actually, we are not in a very comfortable situation. We are always thinking that by changing our situation, we will overcome our mental agitation. And we are always thinking that when we reach a certain point, all mental agitations will disappear. But it is the nature of the material world that we cannot be free from anxiety. Our dilemma is that we are always trying to make a solution to our problems, but this universe is so designed that these solutions never come. Not being a cheater, being very frank and open, Arjuna tells Krishna that the system of yoga which he has described is not possible for him to execute. In speaking to Krishna, it is significant that Arjuna addresses him as Madhusudana, indicating that the Lord is the killer of the demon Madhu. It is notable that God's names are innumerable, for he is often named according to his activities. Indeed, God has innumerable names because he has innumerable activities. We are only parts of God, and we cannot even remember how many activities we have engaged in from our childhood to the present. The eternal God is unlimited. And since his activities are also unlimited, he has unlimited names, of which Krishna is the chief. Then why is Arjuna addressing him as Madhusudana when, being Krishna's friend, he could address him directly as Krishna? The answer is that Arjuna considers his mind to be like a great demon, such as the demon Madhu. If it were possible for Krishna to kill the demon called the mind, then Arjuna would be able to attain the perfection of yoga. My mind is much stronger than this demon Madhu, Arjuna is saying. Please, if you could kill him, then it would be possible for me to execute this yoga system. Even the mind of a great man like Arjuna is always agitated. As Arjuna himself says, Chanchalam hi manha Krishna, pramati balavadriham, tasyaham nigraham manye, vayor iva sudushkaram, which translates into, for the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it is, it seems to me, more difficult than controlling the wind. It is indeed a fact that the mind is always telling us to go here, go there, do this, do that. It is always telling us which way to turn. Thus, the sum and substance of yoga system is to control the agitated mind. In the meditational yoga system, the mind is controlled by focusing on the supersoul. That is the whole process of yoga. But Arjuna says that controlling his mind is more difficult than stopping the wind from blowing. One can imagine a man stretching out his arms, trying to stop a hurricane. Are we to assume that Arjuna is simply not sufficiently qualified to control his mind? The actual fact is that we cannot begin to understand the immense qualifications of Arjuna. After all, he was a personal friend of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is a highly elevated position and is one that cannot be at all attained by one without great qualifications. In addition to this, Arjuna was renowned as a great warrior and an administrator. He was such an intelligent man that he could understand Bhagavad Gita within 1 hour, whereas the present moment scholars cannot even understand it in the course of a lifetime. Yet Arjuna was thinking that controlling the mind was simply not possible for him. Are we then to assume that what was impossible for Arjuna in a more advanced age is possible for us in this degenerate age? We should not for one moment think that we are in Arjuna's category. We are 1,000 times inferior. Moreover, there is no record of Arjuna's having executed the yoga system at any time. Yet Arjuna was praised by Krishna as the only man worthy of understanding the Bhagavad Gita. What was Arjuna's great qualification? Sri Krishna says, "You are my devotee. You are my very dear friend." Despite this qualification, Arjuna refused to execute the meditational yoga system described by Sri Krishna. What then are we to conclude? Are we to despair the mind's ever being controlled? No, it can be controlled, and the process is this Krishna consciousness. The mind must be fixed always in Krishna. Insofar as the mind is absorbed in Krishna, it has attained the perfection of yoga. Now, when we turn to the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 12th canto, we find Sukadev Goswami telling Maharaj Parikshit that in the golden age, the Satyuga, people were living for 100,000 years, and at that time, when advanced living entities lived for such lengths of time, it was possible to execute this meditational system of yoga. But what was achieved in the Satyuga by this meditational process, and in the following yuga, the Treta Yuga, by the offering of great sacrifices, and in the next yuga, the Dwapar Yuga, by temple worship, would be achieved at the present time in this Kali Yuga by simply chanting the names of God, Hari Kirtana, Hare Krishna. So from authoritative sources, we learn that this chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is the embodiment of the perfection of yoga for this age. Today we have great difficulties living 50 or 60 years. A man may live at most 80 or 100 years. In addition, these brief years are always fraught with anxiety, with difficulties due to circumstances of war, pestilence, famine, and so many other disturbances. We are not very intelligent, and at the same time, we are unfortunate. These are the characteristics of a man living in Kali Yuga, a degraded age. So, properly speaking, we can never attain success in this meditational yoga system described by Krishna. At the most, we can only gratify our personal whims by some pseudo adaptation of this system. Thus, people are paying money to attend some classes in gymnastic exercises and deep breathing, and they are happy if they think they can lengthen their lifetimes by a few years or enjoy better sex life. But we must understand that this is not the actual yoga system. In this age, that meditational system cannot be properly executed. Instead, all of the perfections of that system can be realized through Bhakti Yoga, the sublime process of Krishna consciousness, specifically Mantra Yoga, the glorification of Sri Krishna through the chanting of Hare Krishna. That is recommended in Vedic scriptures and is introduced by great authorities like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Indeed, the Bhagavad Gita proclaims that the Mahatmas, the great souls, are always chanting the glories of the Lord. If one wants to be a Mahatma in terms of the Vedic literature, in terms of Bhagavad Gita, and in terms of the great authorities, then one has to adopt this process of Krishna consciousness and of chanting Hare Krishna. But if we are content at making a show of meditation by sitting very straight in lotus position and going into a trance like some sort of performer, then that is a very different thing. But we should understand that such show bottle performances have nothing to do with the actual perfection of yoga. The material disease cannot be cured by artificial medicine. We have to take the real cure straight from Krishna. Thus ends the first chapter. Hare Krishna, Śrila Prabhupāda ki Jai.